Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. I am your host, as always, Hicksydust, here with yet another Pokemon video. Today we'll be talking about Generation 2. Gen 2 first dropped in 1999 in Japan, only about a year after Red and Blue came out in the United States. The US would later get Gen 2 in 2000, a year later, in the form of Pokemon Gold and Silver. I was 10 at the time, and my first copy was Pokemon Gold. In this video, we'll be talking about the updates and additions Gen 2 made to the franchise, and just like in the Gen 1 video, I'll go over some favorite and least favorite Pokemon from this era. Now, just for a quick side note here, putting this video together, compiling the script, and gathering the assets needed, I can let you guys know ahead of time. Dig in. This video is going to be beefy compared to our Gen 1 video. Our starter trio this time around would consist of Chikorita, Cyndaquil, and Totodile. And here's a big switch up compared to my Gen 1 file. In Gen 2, I can actually build a team around either Cyndaquil or Totodile, in comparison to Gen 1, where I basically used Bulbasaur almost exclusively. So why didn't I stick with the same theme and just pick grass again? Well, let me explain. Bulbasaur was awesome for setting up Gen 1. Chikorita, on the other hand, almost handicaps your team coming into Gen 2. While Bulbasaur set you up perfectly with the first two gyms in this game are designed to punish those who choose Chikorita. Falkner running a flying type team, Bugsy running bug types, and then you've got a ton of Team Rocket grunts spamming poison type units like Zubat, Koffing, and Ekans. Makes the early game almost a minefield for anyone brave enough to pick Chikorita. There is another wrinkle here to consider, and while not technically starter specific, should change the way you format your team. Gen 2 increases the number of HMs you need just to explore the map. In Gen 1, we went through HMs like Strength, Cut, Surf, maybe Flash if you didn't want to look up the map online. In Gen 2, we add two more that are water specific, Whirlpool and Waterfall. So you now need 3 water-based HMs to explore everything on the map. And sure, you could dump all these HMs onto one Pokemon, but that could severely limit the versatility of that Pokemon. HMs are not easy to delete at all, and you could be clogging up move slots for a move you want on your Pokemon later down the line. So I think it's easier just to get 2 water Pokemon. I typically don't like double dipping into one pool, but for Gen 2 I make an exception and I spread out the HMs between 2 water Pokemon. It's because of this that Totodile really comes in clutch, because you're starting with one Pokemon who could already take on some of that load, instead of starting with a Pokemon like Cyndaquil or Chikorita, where you now have to catch 2 water-type Pokemon. But before I get too in-depth with my personal teams, we should talk about the big advancements Gen 2 brought to the series. Pokemon Gold and Silver moved us from the original Game Boy to the Game Boy Color, which meant the games finally had actual color instead of just different shades. On top of that, they added a real-time day and night cycle. That's right, with the new day and night cycle, depending on what time you were exploring the map, different Pokemon could potentially show up based on your real-life system clock. Gen 2 also introduced held items for the first time. Now your Pokemon could carry things into battles, such as berries, which your Pokemon could choose when to use to heal themselves or cure status effects. Other moves or other items like Charcoal that boost fire type specific moves, or even items like Quick Claw that sometimes let a slower Pokemon attack first. We've also got a slew of new evolution related items like the Metal Coat, which lets certain Pokemon evolve while holding that item and then getting traded. Those are just a few examples of each type, but this was the generation where items really started to matter. They didn't stop there either. Gen 2 added new evolution methods, including the friendship system. Spend enough time with a Pokemon, keep it from fainting, feed it stat boosters, and Yeah, even give it haircuts. In Golderon City, there are two brothers who run a haircut salon, and using them actually increases your Pokemon's friendship. There are a couple Pokemon that evolve this way, but the big showcase here is Eevee. Level up a high friendship Eevee during the day, you get Espeon. Do the same thing at night, and you'll get Umbreon. Eggs also show up for the first time in this generation. Leave two compatible Pokemon at a daycare, and you might come back to find an egg waiting for you. That's how we get baby Pokemon like Pichu, Togepi, Elekid, and Magby. Pichu being the pre-evolution of Pikachu, and Elekid and Magby being the baby forms for Electabuzz and Magmar respectively, with one more related evolution we'll talk about later. On top of everything we've already discussed, Gen 2 introduced two brand new Pokemon types, Steel type and Dark type. Early on, the Steel type roster includes Magnemite, Magneton, Scizor, the new evolution for Scyther, plus a few others I'll touch on later. Dark type finally gives us a proper answer to Psychic as well, and since we've already pushing the hardware with color, Game Freak went one step further and added shiny Pokemon. Shinies are alternate colored versions of Pokemon that are extremely rare, with the big one exception in this game, the guaranteed red Gyarados sitting in the middle of the Lake of Rage. Gen 2 even gave us a phone system. You can register certain trainers, and then they'll call you to give you tips, free items, or even set up rematches. It's a small thing, but it made Johto feel more alive, being able to explore Johto with your very own iPhone Pro Max. With all that out of the way, we can finally start talking about Pokemon I like to use in Gen 2. If I choose Totodile and go all the way to Feraligatr, I'll usually pair it with Quagsire, Umbreon, Furret, Steelix, and Ampharos. If I choose Cyndaquil instead, I basically swap out Feraligatr for Typhlosion, and Ampharos for Lantern, filling in that electric role but also giving me a second water type. But for the sake of this video, we're going to focus on the first Feraligatr team. As I said, Feraligatr is the final form of Totodile, and aside from looking like something that escaped the Florida Everglades, it can learn strong ice moves late in its move pool that instantly makes it way useful against trainers like Claire, the Dragon-type gym leader, and even Lance in the champion for Johto. Quagsire is the evolution of Derpy Little Whooper, and this guy is where my theme of little guy who turns into Menace starts kicking in again. Quagsire doesn't look like much with that 1,000-yard stare, but being both water and ground means it completely shuts down its biggest supposed weakness, electric type moves. That typing is an absolute gift in-game, and you can really exploit it. The trade-off is that grass moves absolutely destroy this thing. But if you play around that, Quagsire puts in a ton of work. Umbreon as the Dark-type mascot for this generation in my eyes is almost always my choice when I'm deciding what to do with Eevee in Gen 2. On top of loving its design, I'm not much of a morning person, so there aren't a lot of windows where I'm actually playing early enough to hit the Espeon daytime cutoff. Umbreon just makes way more sense for how I actually play the game. That and its special defense is off the charts compared to other Pokemon. Furret, on the other hand, was a huge surprise for me. I basically rediscovered this Pokemon on a recent playthrough, and it shocked me how much it knocked another longtime team member down into the honorable members section for this game. Furret is a pure normal type, it means it only has one weakness, and is pretty neutral to everything else. Combine that with a really flexible move pool, and you get something special here. Furret can learn rock-type moves such as Rollout, and all three of the elemental punches, Fire, Thunder, and Ice. That turns this Pokemon into a true Swiss Army knife that can patch up a ton of weaknesses by itself. Next up is Steelix. And just like Machamp was for me in Gen 1, if I have a trade partner available, Steelix is my party every single time. Game Freak basically looked at Onix and said, "How do we make this giant rock snake even cooler?" And the answer was, make it metal. Steelix takes Brock's iconic Onix and cranks it up to Jasmine's Steel-type ace, which is such an awesome glow-up. I mean, going from one gym leader's ace in your base form, and then evolving and being featured as another, is crazy work. Lastly, we have Ampharos. You start by catching Mareep early on, then it evolves into Flaffy, and eventually into Ampharos, which becomes your electric-type powerhouse. Another perfect example of a small, adorable Pokemon growing into an absolute unit that can carry a lot of fights for you. From here, we move into honorable mentions. First up for me is Crobat. Yes, the Pokemon which got knocked out by Furret. They took that annoying little Zubat from Gen 1, turned it into a full 2-stage line with Golbat, and then Crobat, and they tied in the final evolution to the friendship system. Crobat gets a nice stat booster over Golbat. It's one of the best examples of adding real utility and personality to a previously overlooked Pokemon. To me, it's one of my favorite designs from Gen 2, and after discovering Furret, it was kind of a tough one to put this one on the bench, but I decided to go all the way through, and Furret did not disappoint in that playthrough. Lastly, we have my least liked Pokemon in Gen 2, and that's Smoochum, the baby form of Jinx. You might have noticed Jinx didn't show up in my Gen 1 video at all, and there's a reason for that. Jinx was in a dead heat with Mr. Mime for my most disliked Gen 1 Pokemon, and Mr. Mime won. That's how little I care for Jinx, and the fact that it got a baby form in Smoochum does nothing for me. Honestly, I'm giving it more attention than it already deserves, and it's starting to annoy me, so we're moving on. There we have it. Awesome Pokemon, another Elite Four, credits roll, and you think that's game, right? What if I told you no?
What?
What if I told you that getting past the credits is actually the only way to catch everything Gen 2 has to offer? After you beat the Elite Four, you can explore Kanto, the full map from Gen 1. Catch and add even more Pokemon to your team, rematch the original gym leaders and Elite Four, or you could be like me, cut your losses because you're way too attached to the current squad you've already whipped up, and you're just going to move on to Gen 3. I want to take a second to thank all of you for sticking with me through this video. We covered a lot more ground here than we did in Gen 1, and if you made it this far, you're a real one. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel to keep up with everything Pokemon, and hopefully, I'll see you in the next one.